Hey, everyone, I'd like to call to order the work session for the City Council for Monday, October 9, 2023. Ms. Eldridge, would you please call the roll?
Mayor Bolin,
Here.
Councilmember Clark,
Here.
Councilmember Bartoni.
Here.
Councilmember Nyan, Councilmember Farmer,
Here.
Councilmember McCutcheon,
Here.
Councilmember Rambo, Councilmember Flasher,
Here.
Councilmember Garitano, Councilmember Brost,
Here.
Councilmember Edens.
Here.
Councilmember Ottenberg,
Here.
Councilmember Dodwell,
Here.
Councilmember Marshall, Councilmember Jaxi,
Here.
Councilmember Hopper, Councilmember Galani.
Here. All right, good evening and welcome, everyone. Informational items, we have 19 before we go to action items. Is there anything under information that anyone would like to discuss or about which you have a question? Councilmember Edens.
Yes, I did go through the attachment, but this question is for Parks and Planning, but I was just a little bit unclear. Did this 90% plan on the city or the village green include the necessary infrastructure for the sound stage so that we can use our own rather than continue to rent sound stages?
Design of all of the utilities necessary for the summer concert series as well as Celebrate Wildwood. In terms of the sound, again, the primary component is electricity, so we will have that available, but we do not have a structure or building associated with phase one.
Okay, so we'd still either need stage rental for weather, light rental and sound.
Yes,
equipment.
I shudder to think what the cost of phase one would be if we added even a small building with restroom facilities at this stage. So again, we're just preparing the site. We have a hard surface for the stage, easy access to the stage for delivery, but no, nothing akin to a structure or any type of speaker system.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else have anything under information? Councilor McCutcheon.
Yes, I do. I need some clarification on the hard court surface that we had planned for City Park. We had done the design and the engineering that we need as far as water, soils and all of that. And now it's my understanding that it's going to be contained with the green development. Is that correct?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councilmember McCutcheon, that is correct. As part of the planned Greenberg development, the hardcourt area was moved from Community Park to what I described the orphan piece of ground on the east side of Taylor Road, just north of the roundabout at Manchester Road. The good news is, Ms. McCutcheon, though, with the work of the engineer for Greenberg development and the parks designer that did the plan for Community Park, we were able to replicate the same design from Community Park to the new location. So we'll have the same number of pickleball courts and the single tennis court that's convertible to 2 half-court areas for basketball.
And who's paying for that construction?
At this stage, the Greenberg development is doing the primary cost for the design and engineering. And ultimately, according to Mr. Cohn, principal in Greenberg development, they will donate the land to the city for the court. But at this stage, the cost of the construction will be to the city.
And do you have any idea when they're going to donate the land to the city?
My understanding is for banking purposes, they will continue to hold the property for a period of time. But once the loans are finalized and I believe some steps are made, then the donation will follow.
And so does that mean that the city is going to be renting basically or leasing the land from the Greenberg development in the meantime?
My understanding is there'll need to be an agreement formulated between Greenberg Development and the city. I will depend on our city attorney, John Young, to assist in that. But as in other cases with Mr. Cohn, we either have paid $0 for the use of property or $1 per year.
Okay, thank you for the clarification. Appreciate it.
You're welcome, ma'am.
Sorry, seeing none, we move to no further questions or items under information. We move to action items. The first is the trash rebate program. You have a memorandum from our city administrator. So as you know, we recently learned that we were getting just over $1 million from a class action lawsuit that we did not anticipate. And we had some preliminary discussions at our last council meeting as to what should be done with that. And so that's where we are this evening, is to decide what we should do. The genesis of the city administrator's memo, as you may recall from the last meeting, was my recommendation that we provide a credit to our residents in the amount of roughly $90 for their trash service. I had several reasons for that, which I'm happy to explain, but that's the basis for that memo. But the floor is open to discussion. Councilmember Dodwell.
While I understand that the cost for trash has gone up, I'm paying the same as every citizen here. I think we do have, as a city, some additional expenses that those funds would be better served for, rather than having to go back out to our citizens and ask for more money later. Those include repairs on this particular building that we're sitting in right now. It includes the repairs on the various parks that we have, and it includes the ongoing maintenance of said parks, et cetera. We do not have a parks fund. We do not have a parks tax. At this point, I think we need to ensure that our funds that we are able to garner from something that's totally separate from this issue of the trash that we are facing. While I appreciate the fact that all of us citizens are bearing a slightly higher cost, every municipality in the area is either currently dealing with a raised cost or will be the next time that they issue a contract. So just my perspective on the issue.
Thank you. Councilor Edens.
Okay, question and then a comment. Can this money go into the general fund without being earmarked right at this time? Or does the city administrator require direction tonight?
There will need to be, regardless of what is done with it, an amendment to the budget that will need to be voted on by this council.
Okay.
And that will happen at the next council meeting in November.
Okay, so I understand the gesture, which I think is a nice one, because it would apply to every individual that is essentially in the city. However, because this came from Charter Spectrum, and what I have dealt with in my ward is that Ward 2 was left out of the internet expansion phase 1 contract. And I've got residents that are on hotspots. When they ask me, how can you say we have to wait to enter into a phase 2 contract because you may not have the money? And here is money specifically from Spectrum. I wouldn't be able to look at them without an answer, so with a straight face and in good conscience. And I think the other issue is, even if I had, a motion tonight that said to proceed with a contract, phase 2, regardless of where the money comes from, it still can't start until after phase 1. Spectrum has told us that. And then the problem with that is I'm entirely dependent on the political will of what could potentially be a future and very different council. And while I know that there's political will here to make it right, or to spend money from reserves if we have to, so that we don't leave residents on hotspots in their house, I don't know that that's guaranteed for the future. So I've spent some time thinking about this. So yes, we need money for parks. Yes, we need money for erosion. Yes, deer reduction. There's a lot of different competing needs from the city, but I will make this argument to everybody else up here. The money came from Spectrum. let's use it to finish what we started on internet expansion. And, you know, I'm not trying to cross hard feelings, but I'll make that motion to amend it tonight, that it goes towards that. And it sounds like it won't cover it, but maybe that combined with ARPA and then, you know, potentially grants or reserves will do the trick.
So your motion is to spend it for the second phase of internet?
Yes, it is.
Okay, is there a second motion? Second by Councilmember Bartoni. I just want to mention a couple of things. So first of all, for information, we have, isn't it, Tom, 500,000 from ARPA left for that?
After interest earnings, we have 810,000 that we'll have after we spend the 6.75 million.
What'd you say again? Sorry.
810,000.
810,000. And you anticipate best guess for the second phase, just best guess?
Spitballing, it could be roughly anywhere between 3 to 4 million.
And so as Councilor Edens pointed out, it is correct that charters indicated that the second phase will not start until after first phase is done, which is April of next year. Is that correct?
Yes, correct. Per the contract, April 3rd, 2024 is the scheduled end date. And if they get done sooner, then great, but that is when they anticipate completing it.
Okay. And then relative to the projection that you just made, why are you making that projection given the number of homes that would be contained in it, which is quite a bit smaller than what we paid 6.75 for many.
Yes, so Spectrum has indicated that prices have increased since we signed that initial contract. So the price to get internet to the individual homes will go up per home. That being said as well, currently we're at around 500 homes that have inquired about being on the phase 2 list. And in this case, those individuals are just part of the pie because we are actually getting data from Spectrum that'll identify potential other homes. And I'm expecting that will probably add roughly 200 homes to the list because of maps that I've been able to see with the Department of Broadband Infrastructure with the Missouri State. So in this case, roughly speaking, it could be just trying to brace for impact 3 to 4 million based off the increase in the price to get them to each home. And also just the fact that we're probably going to be looking at 700 to 750 homes in phase 2.
Okay. And then last question, where I'm headed with this is what other means, and I've got two potentially that could be used for that, that being the internet. So we have three. One is the leftover ARPA funds. So that shaves off how much? 700?
810,000.
So 800,000. And then given that the contract with charter, the phase 1 with charter is not going to be done until April of next year, as a practical matter, that would probably move some of that, if not all of the installation, potentially into both 2024, but certainly into 2025. And I think based on our discussion, we would likely have quite a bit of money to put to that at that point. Is that correct?
That is correct. We would expect the expenditures to actually, if we structured the contract like we did the first, they didn't, we just actually start paying out for the first contract, the first 10%. So I wouldn't expect to actually be paying the bill until roughly late 2024, early 2025.
Okay. And then, so we have that. So we have three possibilities to pay for it. We have the ARPA funds of 800. We have allocating, line items in the budget for certainly 2025 for it. And then lastly, the reserves. And so one thing I just want to mention, and this is a philosophical issue, not necessarily a practical issue. I do favor limited government. We have 28 million in reserves. Our total operating budget is 27 million. To my knowledge, I don't think we've ever had an occasion to draw into reserves. I look at all of this as our taxpayers' money. So aside from the practical fact that I think we can still do what we want to do, and plus we have some other jurisdictions, whether it's St. Louis County with Old State Road or what's the Missouri American Water with respect to our erosion, that I think we need to press more because it's really more their problem than ours on some of these things. But long story short, the reason I'm proposing this is not just for the factual practical reasons of I think we can do as we had planned to do before we had the million, what we planned in terms of the strategic plan, but also underlying that is a philosophy that I just personally have about less is more with government. So those are my points. Any other discussion on the motion? Councilmember McCutcheon?
It's basically a question. I may be getting the title of this wrong, but isn't there some BEAD money out there? I don't know if it's from the state or the federal government. Is that accurate?
Thank
City
you.
Administrator.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, so there is BEAD funds out there. The application has not gone live yet. The department has met with BJ Tanksley, the director of that broadband infrastructure with the state, and they expect the application to go live roughly in February or March of 2024, and they don't expect the first award announcements to go out until about August or September of 2024. So the earliest we would potentially see a wave of funding from there would probably be September or August of 2024 if we were eligible.
And what are we required to use those funds for?
Those funds would be required specifically for broadband infrastructure development, so we would only be able to use them on phase 2 of the Spectrum project.
So given the mayor's comments and the addition of that funding, will we have more than enough funding to go ahead and fund everyone who has either been underserved or who has not received internet as of yet?
It is very possible if we were to the big if here is if we were to receive funding from the state. Missouri did get a nice chunk of that pie from the BEAD program, but that being said, we would have to, get awarded that money. But I do believe that if we were awarded that money, they would probably allocate enough to cover the rest of the city.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Jaxie.
So before Councilmember Edens brought up using potentially these funds to fund phase 2, I came into this thinking that we have several bills waiting. The building, the phase 2, water erosion, the Deer project. There's so many bills on the horizon that we don't really, that I don't know that we're ready for. And so I was going to suggest that we hold off on allocating the funding in any direction. But based on Councilmember Eden's recommendation, that the money came from Spectrum originally, that I can support that as well.
Thank you, Councilmember Rose.
Yeah, I mean, on maybe a little more global basis, I think what we're talking about tonight is the adequacy of our reserves. And the question is whether we take the $1 million that came from Spectrum or we take $1 million in our general reserve, still comes back to a question that I've asked before is what should our reserves be? And we have an ordinance. I understand that ordinance once upon a time was based on a study. But I don't think we have a current analysis based on our current needs as to what do we need. And I would say is that, whether it's the money that came back from Spectrum, the $1 million in question, or if it's just money that we decide we have too much and we return that to our residents, to me, it doesn't matter which money we return. What matters is should we do it? And I think that, as a bean counter at heart, I want to see something that quantifies what we need as a city. And I think I've asked for it for a few years. It's a tough number to come up with because there's no right answer. We'd all have a different opinion, but I think we need that before we decide how to spend part of a number we don't know about. And again, if Tom, you could do a great job on coming up with that, and we'll all have a different opinion, but we all have to accept something and go forward. But at this point, all these items we've talked about, we haven't quantified. I mean, including the office building, which is probably the smallest one. So that's, but with that said, I don't mind earmarking it toward internet because internet is our number one goal for the city. And we all decided that. So in my mind, if you're not sure how to move forward on something, I'm going to pull out those strategic goals and I'm not going to put it toward one that's either not on there or is low on the bottom. I'm going to put it on one that's at the top. So if it's not internet, it's erosion because that's where we're at. And so thank you.
Councilmember Galani.
Yeah, I was gonna bring up similar to what Councilmember Rose just said regarding the reserve, and I think you mentioned earlier, Mayor. I think it was a couple of years ago, maybe, when we were all sitting here and the reserves were sitting at 16 million. And we all were in relative agreement that that was probably higher than what we needed it to be. And now we're sitting here at 28 million. So I think with that being said, when we're talking about internet, and we're talking about some of these other things, we can sit down and have the debate and the conversation and come up with that number you're talking about of what we actually need. But I don't think it's a far stretch to say that we have plenty in there that could be allocated once we come up with that number, because it's probably gonna be a lot lower than what that is. But I think right now, you know, with inflation and everything else that's going on, the residents of the city are, you know, we've heard a lot of the feedback from folks regarding the change in the trash service and whatnot, and they're feeling that pain today. And, you know, that extra money that they're paying out right now is an impact that they're going to feel immediately. So the fact that we've got this you know, settlement that we had received a year ago or whatnot, and we know we've got a lot of money in that reserve account that we're probably gonna be able to allocate in other directions. I don't think it's such a bad idea that we would earmark or give back this relatively minimal amount right now that would have a direct impact on the pocketbooks of the residents of the city right away, and help show that gesture that we are intending to give back, and not hold on to that extra money that we don't really need right now. We've got these other projects we're working on, a lot of which is being funded by the federal government, and then we've got the additional funds potentially next year for phase 2. I support the idea of leveraging it for the trash reimbursement to help, you know, people to have a little bit of alleviation in that cost increase. So on my point.
Thank you, Councilmember Marshall.
So they're gonna be. Also, one budget. Have a lot of different. Yeah.
Or you could delay doing anything with it that would avoid the vote on it until you do that. Which would be a motion to postpone the motion until that occurs. Councilmember Bros.
I guess my question is with respect to our reserves, I mean, I've heard a few different numbers tonight, but what is our unrestricted reserve balance for the city?
City Administrator.
It is roughly around 28 million, but I'll get you the exact number here. Unreserved 25.4 million.
Okay, so last year in the annual report, it was 18 million.
That was for general operating.
Okay, so what the difference between 18 and 25? Which reserves, where's that money at?
Could you elaborate?
Well, the 7 million.
Yeah, so I mean, that is spread out across different funds. So we have our capital improvement sales tax fund, our road and bridge fund. But when it comes to our general operating, it's around 12. Well, yep.
But we can't move between the funds. Like we can't take
No.
money from the bridge fund and put it in internet. We can't return money. So we, in my mind, see, I think we have more in the $18 million range.
Yes.
That's available in the way we're talking.
Point of information, the internet project would probably be available from capital improvement reserves, because it's a one-time, the key there is.
So it's not in the 18 million.
Correct.
Yeah, and I agree with that, but I think we're talking about 18 million.
And potentially watershed, because the key is one-time thing versus ongoing. If it's ongoing, it's operating reserve. If it's a one-time thing, it's capital reserve. And both of those are capital, in my opinion.
Some are restricted, some are not.
Right. Councilmember Ottenberg.
So I think we have both a motion and a second so far that these funds should be allocated towards internet.
Correct.
may I offer an amendment to this legislation?
Depends on the amendment.
Okay, so what I'm proposing is that we delay the vote on this for 1 month to give us time to decide how we really feel this money should be used.
So that would be a motion to postpone, well, how you feel the money should really be used. Are you talking about, so that's what the main motion's about. Are you talking about after a discussion or more information on the reserves? Is that what you mean?
Yes,
Okay, so that would be a motion to postpone for that.
right.
Okay.
Mhm.
Rather than amend
Yeah, a motion to postpone.
to the next meeting to get the reserve issues clarified per Councilmember Brost. Is that what
Yes.
you're wanting to do? Okay. Is there a second to that? Seconded by Councilmember Flasher. So the debate now is only on the motion to postpone, not on the main motion. On the motion to postpone, Councilmember Eden.
Yeah, my only comment is, I because it's still the number one priority for the city, because it's part of an ongoing project and because of where the money came from, I don't think the priority will shift the more we think about it. And it is important to have a discussion about reserves, what should be loosened up, but I don't think that changes the outcome or the importance of this vote, which is the only reason I vote against it. I thought when I asked before I made the motion that I couldn't put it in the general fund without it being earmarked. So maybe I misunderstood because it sounded like the opposite was said after Councilmember Marshall spoke, but I would still keep my motion on the floor. And I will say this too, being a member of the Watershed Erosion Task Force, regardless if there's another jurisdiction involved like MSD, the reality,
On the motion to postpone.
yeah. There will be plenty of other things to spend money on that does not include the biggest priority and an ongoing project that we can debate about for many months and about what percentage can come out of that. And the other thing that was brought up in committee is that we may not get the grants because these grants are not like ARPA for qualifying. So could also have a population cap and a like average household income cap. So we might be paying more than we think we are in this next grant round. So I just don't think it'll change if we delay it. That's where I'm coming from.
Councilor Flasher.
For me, just postponing it and getting a better understanding of the reserve situation helps me when voting for what the what the motion or what was proposed in the first place as far as a trash rebate in regards to, going that route or going towards putting this towards internet stuff. So I'd like to have that understanding, and that's why I supported the postponement myself.
Councilor Brost.
I guess the question is if we do earmark it for internet, but the funds develop elsewhere, if it's no longer needed, would those funds be released for other purposes?
We'd have to amend the budget. We'd have to amend the budget.
So the council could agree to do that.
Yes.
That is correct.
Yes.
So if the money's not needed, it doesn't just sit there forever.
Yes.
Okay, so we have a Councilmember Rim
A real quick comment.
on postponement.
Yes, I think we have a number of implicit commitments, maintaining the city hall building, road safety, those kinds of things. Our most explicit commitment to the residents is internet. For that reason, this money came from charter, and I think it probably ought to go back to charter or to provide internet. So I see Larry's excellent point and everyone else's excellent points about the reserve are completely valid, and we need to figure that out. But I think this money should go to.
Okay, thank you, Councilor Bartoni.
Thank you. I think the money should go towards the internet also, but I'm okay just postponing this until we get a better understanding of everything. But that being said, since this lawsuit's been going on since Ed was wearing short pants, and we read before cable, can we get a better understanding from our city attorney? Where did this, what did charter do wrong? Why did they have to pay us this much?
City Attorney,
And I know it was a class action suit.
Right.
about.
In very short terms, they were not properly collecting and distributing a tax that they should have.
So they weren't just, they were collecting from residents.
They were not collecting.
They were not collecting.
Right.
And they should have been. Nobody was-
They owe the tax irrespective of whether they collected from their customers or not. But they were not remitting the tax that was due to the various municipalities that had.
And if I could further, Councilor Bartoni, answer that question, just for people, we know this here, but people who may be watching or in the audience, the city of Wildwood did not initiate this lawsuit or
Right.
class action. It was initiated by the city of Winchester.
Was it?
And-
I thought it was Brentwood, but it was Winchester.
It was
Okay.
Winchester, and then other municipalities were made part of the class. In a class action context, you get the option to opt in or opt out. And we chose to opt in. So, but I just want to be clear that we did not initiate that. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. And I mean, like I said, I think this money should go towards internet, but I think even 30 days is going to be really hard to figure out, like how much money we need for internet, how much money we need for erosion, for people that that were at the council forum. I guess it would have been 2 years ago. One of the last questions was what would you love to see for the city or whatever? And I kind of, I'm going to be paraphrasing, but my answer was basically, I'd love to have the city have enough money for the internet, for erosion, and for parks and maintenance. You know, unfortunately, that's probably going to be somewhere around $30 million, and we'll never have all that. But I just think that when we do get these windfalls, we need to be very careful how we use them and use it very, very smart. Because probably not going to get $1 million windfall every year.
Okay, so only on postponement. Councilmember McCutcheon. Yeah, you're muted.
Okay.
There you go.
So a follow-up for Mr. Young. The money that we received as part of the class action suit, was it earmarked for any specific project or for the internet, or is it just allocated to the city for them to spend as they see fit?
It is a general revenue tax that is not earmarked.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so we have a motion to postpone to the next meeting. Let's do a show of hands. And if you can do that as well, Councilmember McCutcheon. So all in favor of motion to postpone to the next meeting based on the Ottenberg motion, please raise your right hand. 6, 7, 8, 9. I count 9. Is that correct? Okay. All opposed? Raise your right hand or left. Okay, so the motion passes 9-6, correct? Yep, motion passes, so it'll be postponed. Good discussion. Thank you so much for that. Moving next, planning and parks. Alterations to Center Avenue, Mr. Benich.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor and members of City Council, the Planning and Parks Committee is presenting to you tonight a recommendation regarding changes to Center Avenue, a recent street in town center accepted for public maintenance. In this particular instance, the committee recommended, given circumstances, that at this initial stage, no sidewalk would be included, no vertical curbs, gutters, or more formal stormwater facilities would be constructed, but the city would do its best to address any MSD requirements, the relocation of a water line to improve the grades associated with existing driveways, and then finally, streetlights if funding allows. So tonight, the Planning and Parks Committee via this department and the Department of Public Works are requesting authorization to proceed with those omissions and the modifications as recommended. Thank you.
Councilor Farmer.
Joe, so I guess would the idea then be if we were to postpone those things, we would come back to them later, or are those things just not something we need there?
Given the circumstances that have been associated with Center Avenue, there are a few properties that have not been part of the development cycle, and those are the ones that are creating the narrowness of the right of way. And so the likelihood that in the future they might be is probably pretty good. So I would say if in the future we can make those changes and add sidewalks or at least one sidewalk, pedestrian facility, and do the rest, certainly. But at this stage, we've made a commitment to improve the road. We have funding set aside this year that we're asking to be carried over into the new fiscal year. But I think we need to get a project moving forward, and minus these things, it still would be an improvement both from the terms of function and safety.
Any other questions, comments, or a motion? You're looking for a motion to proceed as you requested, is that correct?
Yes, please, Mr. Mayor.
And so, Joe, in a nutshell, the impetus for this is what?
Again, when we were going through the discussions on Center Avenue and acceptance of as a public street, the residents made requests that it be more of a town center street than a rural street. And so, given that we can't make that happen, the departments, Public Works and Planning, are wanting to ensure that there is support on city council as we go back to the residents and say, here's the things we can do, here's the things we can't. And since we're spending a substantial amount of money to make the street improvements, I think it's imperative that city council know what we're thinking.
So is this a must or a wish?
I believe it is a must because we ultimately garnered 21 quitclaim deeds from residents to provide for the conversion from private to public. And it was all premised on improving the street to a safe and functional standard.
Councilor Farmer.
I'm happy to make the motion if that's what we think is the best thing. I would just, caution if we're getting quitclaim deeds from people and they have an expectation that is going to be one thing, and then all of a sudden it turns out to be something else. A heavy amount of communication would probably be necessary to let them know what to expect. But I'm happy to make the motion.
Okay, so we have a motion to proceed as indicated by the department, seconded by Councilmember Dodwell. Is there any discussion on the motion? See no discussion. All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
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 I didn't hear Councilmember McCutcheon there.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. All right, thank you, Mr. Vinich. So that takes us to our executive session. If there is no objection, out of deference to our city team members here in the room, I would suggest that we rearrange the agenda to do our receipt and files first before we do the executive session. Would there be any objection to rearranging the agenda to that effect? All right, seeing no objection, first receipt and file. And if you want to handle these in unison, feel free, that's up to you. I know they all relate to solar. Let's see, I think all of them except for one relates to solar panels. So if you want to handle, I'm sorry, just handle them as you wish, but if you want to handle them, if you think you can handle them in unison, feel free. Go.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor and members of City Council, at the last Planning and Zoning Commission meeting on October 2nd, a group of solar panel requests were processed and acted upon by the body. The requests before you tonight are in the form of a letter of recommendation which reflects final action by the Planning and Zoning Commission. In each of these four instances, the Planning and Zoning Commission endorsed the granting of the conditional use permit and proceeded forward with the same. These, for the most part, are proposals that have a front-facing component associated with them. The rationale for the authorization and granting the permits was based upon the solar opinion survey and the results of such, which seemed to indicate almost a 2-to-1 support for the installation of solar panels on homes, including front-facing components. So tonight, these four items are being presented for receipt and filing. And as the city council is aware, as with any conditional use permit, the city council has 15 days to exercise its power of review. The Planning and Zoning Commission did respectfully request that 15-day period of review be waived for these four, and that would allow them to proceed forward with the installations in time to receive what I believe are rebates from Ameren, Missouri associated with these types of installations. If there are any questions on any of the four, the department, Mr. Brost and Mayor Boland are available to discuss them or answer them. Thank you.
So by four, you're talking about the first four as shown on the agenda, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Any questions, comments, or a motion to waive the 15-day review period? Councilmember Brost.
I'll make the motion to waive.
Okay, we have a motion to waive the 15-day review period on the part of the council, seconded by Councilmember Ottenberg. Any discussion on the motion? See no discussion on the motion. Please say all in favor. Please say aye. I'm sorry. Oh, Councilmember Brost, my
Yeah,
apologies.
I guess the one point I'd like to make is that at the planning and zoning meeting, I did ask Mr. Young that granting of these approvals does not really affect or interfere with our future legislation. Is that a correct statement?
That is correct.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? All right, seeing none, all in favor of the motion to waive the council's 15-day review period, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. I think that takes us to PZ 3-23.
I believe the next item relates
two,
to
three.
the request to accept the private alleys at the manors of the Meadows of Cherry Hills.
Hold on. I thought you said there were four of the P and Z requests.
The first one's a CID budget.
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I apologize.
No, I apologize. All right, go to the next item, which is item 6.
Thank you again, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor and members of City Council, the Planning and Zoning Commission was asked to consider a request from the Homeowners Association associated with the manors at the Meadows of Cherry Hills relating to 2 sets of private alleys. As the City Council is aware, during the update of the Town Center Plan, a recommendation came from the Volunteer Committee to allow private alleys to be converted to public purposes, and any future alleys would be public in nature. That particular recommendation was endorsed and ratified by the City Council after adoption by the Planning and Zoning Commission as an amendment to the Town Center Plan. The Planning and Zoning Commission reviewed this request, analyzed it based upon several criteria, and recommended that the City Council consider the acceptance of these private alleys for public maintenance in the future. This action was premised, though, on the policy for acceptance being adhered to by the Homeowners Association. So tonight, this is for your receipt and filing as part of the overall formula for private alleys to be accepted for public purposes. If there are any questions or comments, the department would be glad to answer them at this time.
Any questions or comments from Mr. Benz? Okay, thank you, Joe.
Thank
I think
you.
that takes care of receipts and files. So we go to our executive session. We'll need a motion to do that. Yeah. Yeah, I don't think any. Thank you, Dale. We'll need a motion and a roll call vote to go into executive session, made by Councilmember Flasher, seconded by Councilmember Hopper. Any discussion on the motion? All right, seeing none, please call the roll on the motion to go into closed session. We do. Councilmember Hopper. He seconded it.
It's on the agenda, so that's sufficient.
Okay. Councilmember Clark.
Yes.
Councilmember Bartoni,
Yes.
Councilmember Nyan, Councilmember Farmer,
Yes.
Councilmember McCutcheon,
Abstain.
Councilmember Rambo, Councilmember Flasher.
Yes.
Councilmember Garitano, Councilmember Bros,
Yes.
Councilmember Edens.
Yes.
Councilmember Ottenberg,
Yes.
Councilmember Dodwell,
Yes.
Councilmember Marshall, Councilmember Jaxi, Councilmember Hopper,
Yes.
Councilmember Galani.
Yes.
Okay, we're going to go into closed session. Thank you. Okay, council members, we are now back in session for the work session, and the only remaining item is an adjournment. There's nothing further. Would someone like to make a motion to adjourn? Made by Councilmember Marshall, seconded by Councilmember Brost. It's a non-debatable motion, so all in favor of the motion to adjourn, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. We're waiting, Councilmember McCutcheon. All right. Now I'd like to, and I want to thank everyone for their patience that's with us here this evening as we completed our executive session before we go into the main meeting. I want to call to order the main meeting of the council for the city of Wildwood for Monday, October 9, 2023. Ms. Eldridge, would you please call the roll?
Mayor Bullen,
Here.
Councilmember Clark.
Here.
Councilmember Bartoni.
Here.
Councilmember Nyan. Councilmember Farmer.
Here.
Councilmember McCutcheon. Councilmember Rambo. Councilmember Flasher.
Here.
Councilmember Garitano.
Here.
Councilmember Bros.
Here.
Councilmember Edens.
Here.
Councilmember Ottenberg.
Here.
Councilmember Dodwell.
Here.
Councilmember Marshall. Councilmember Jaxi.
Here.
Councilmember Hopper.
Here.
Councilmember Galani.
Here. All right, excellent. Welcome everyone again. We're honored this evening to have Boy Scout Troop 456 to lead us in our Pledge of Allegiance. And as they proceed with this, for those of you who are comfortably able when they direct, please stand. Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice. Okay, and I want to thank each one of you so much for being with us this evening and doing that. It's a real joy to have you here and see you again. Moving next to minutes, this is on the consent agenda, but if anyone was not here at the last meeting and would like to have a vote on it now, we can do that, or we can leave it. Sometimes if you weren't here, you want to abstain. So Councilor McCutcheon.
Yeah, I just want to let Megan know that I hadn't been promoted as a panelist. That's why I didn't say here.
Okay, I think we've got you now.
Okay,
That's all
thank
right.
you.
Okay, thank you. Sorry about that. Okay, so we'll leave the minutes on the consent agenda. No one wants to take them off. All right. Moving next to public participation. Just want to mention a couple of things about that. It's a valuable component of our meeting. Anyone who wishes to speak must indicate that they would like to do that by completing a card and providing it to our city clerk, who is to the left of the podium, or raising your hand if you're on Zoom. When your name is called, please state your name and your ward. If you live outside the city, please give us your address. To ensure that all who wish to speak have the opportunity to do so, there is a 5-minute time limitation. I'll let you know when the time limit is reached. If you have any questions for us, please mention that during your remarks and notify the official that you would like to respond. And that official will make note of it. And at the conclusion of public participation, any official who chooses to respond will have 3 minutes to do so as to all questions directed to that official. The official may choose to respond to your questions after tonight's meeting, and we may also post any responses from that official on the city council page of our website. Please be respectful to others in making your remarks. This means that interrupting others and using profane and abusive language are prohibited. And the last thing I want to mention, we do have a full agenda tonight. Sometimes I do let people go over by a little bit. Tonight, we're going to hold it strictly to 5 minutes, and I appreciate your understanding of that. First speaker card, please.
The first speaker card is Francis Babb.
Hello again. I am becoming a fixture here in the city of Wildwood. My name is Frances Babb. I live at 2001 Kerrsdale Court in Clarkson Valley, Missouri. I am here to ask a couple questions and also to give you my feedback about your new proposed solar ordinance. And I'm going to direct these questions to your city administrator for a response after I get my 5 minutes. Woohoo, 5 minutes. My question is, why isn't there a public hearing on the new ordinance that showed up on today's agenda? And the second question is, how long is it going to take under the new ordinance, assuming it passes, to get a permit? And in that regard, it would be helpful for me to understand the workflow that happens from the time the city receives the permit to the time the city finally issues the permit. And I think a little clarification in that would be really helpful. Okay, now about the proposed solar ordinance. Number one, this is a massively huge improvement over the previous ordinance. I can't even begin to tell you. And I'm so thankful for it. I have 6 areas of minor concern, and these are concerns to me as a homeowner wanting to install solar, but I do not represent the interest of the solar industry. I have no affiliation with them other than the fact that I know a lot of these guys. Okay, these are my 6 areas of concern. Number one, you prohibit in the proposed ordinance ground mounts and awning systems. Now, I know that in general, you have a pretty good idea of what a ground mount looks like, but they don't necessarily have to look like that. There are applications of ground mounts that are really quite beautiful for carports or shelters for parking. I recommended one for your own parking lot. For a city park, okay, like a picnic area that is covered with like a canopy kind of system. So there are all kinds of really cool applications of those that you are in essence prohibiting and requiring people to go through a variance process in order to get something that would otherwise be quite attractive. Okay, the second thing is awnings. Okay, an awning kind of is like an area that's not attached to the roof. It's attached to the side of the building that goes downward and protects people from the rain and the elements. And I think an awning system here in town center would look incredible. So your proposed ordinance does prohibit those. The biggest issue that I think is going to give you the most grief is this issue about symmetry, okay? Right now, symmetry is not clearly defined in the proposed ordinance, and it needs to be, okay? And whatever that you decide symmetry needs to be, I don't envision this symmetry requirement lasting very long because if you require symmetry on the front of the house, but don't require it on the sides of the house or the back of the house, people are going to see the other 3 sides and they're going to come to expect solar to look a certain way. So, you know, if you're trying to avoid the NIMBYs being upset, I mean, they're still going to be upset if you only require symmetry on the front of the house. And then the second reason why I don't think this is going to stand very long is people are just going to mutiny over it. Okay, why would anybody want to undersize their ideal system just because the city says so or the neighbors might complain? I mean, it's just silly. Okay, and I hope that you don't enact it. And if you do, I hope that doesn't last very long and that you reconsider this, in a year or two, because I think it's a really bad idea. The next issue that I have a concern is licensing. Okay, in your proposed ordinance, you state that you must be NABCEP certified. That's the cool thing. Okay, people that get certified through NABCEP are really top-notch professionals. But if you limit it to just NABCEP, you might potentially be eliminating a whole bunch of people that have not gone through.
Thank you for your comments.
Oh, crap. I had so much more to say.
Thank you. Next speaker
Okay.
card, please.
The next speaker card is Niall Stevens.
I was here to speak on Niall Stevens, Ward 8, speak on two issues, solar first. I do hope that you all can come together this evening to approve energy efficient options for solar for Wildwood residents. I think it's just terrible that it has come to a lawsuit by aggrieved residents for this basic home improvement. And for months, the city has taken away residents' property rights. They've taken away their constitutional rights to equal protection under the law because we've already done solar before in Wildwood. And you've taken residents' money, time, stress, and it's just terrible to treat people this way. And so it is time for Wildwood to give residents those rights back. And I do implore you to pass legislation for solar that is energy efficient that the residents want. Second subject, the trash rebate. I saw that on the work session agenda, and elected officials rarely admit mistakes, but this rebate plan is a tantamount admission of guilt here for the poor process that doubled and tripled costs for Wildwood residents for trash service. The city just obliterated the procurement process and the best practices that are used for purchasing in the city, and it has resulted in millions of dollars that residents are going to be forced to overpay for this basic municipal service. And when this change happened, there was no admission that it was a bad deal for the residents. Mr. Garitano, you blamed market conditions. Ms. Edens, you emailed the residents saying that you're blaming time and that you had to use emergency powers to get this done right away. Mr. Bolin, you blamed Joe Biden for the trash contract and inflation. And this rebate shows you did have options. There was other things that you definitely could have done to save the residents money. And I would like the money back. And so I've seen the public records requests that have been made about this issue. I know how this went down. And I feel like we've been ripped off on the trash service, and I'd like any money back as possible. So please consider the rebate when it comes back after the 1 month postponement. Thank you.
Next speaker card, please.
The next speaker card is Betsy Vanderhayden.
Good evening, Betsy Vanderhayden, 16560 Birch Forest Drive, Ward 5. I want to thank the council for rejecting that highly restrictive solar legislation on September 11th and moving forward with legislation that reflects the views of Wildwood residents. Bill 2829 is a step in the right direction. However, under current solar regulations, there's no requirements for solar arrays to be symmetrical or limited to squares and rectangles. This is true for both projects approved through the planning department or the CUP process. So as you could get a non-symmetrical approval with our legislation. So that to me seems unnecessarily restrictive. This requirement should not be imposed on current or future applications. A requirement like this will greatly impact a solar project's return on investment, reduce benefits on Ameren bills, and having a system that falls short of providing all the energy that is needed by a home. I'm in support of all the applicants requesting front-facing visible panels and allowing their projects to have symmetrical or asymmetrical arrays. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Next speaker card, please. Do we have anyone on Zoom?
No one's raised their hand, Mr. Mayor.
All right.
Mr. Mayor, I apologize for interrupting. someone had their hand up for a split second there. I apologize. Do you want me to-
Okay, Mr. Marinac, you are here for public participation. Is that correct?
That is correct. Good evening, Mr. Mayor and council members. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I am the former Vice President of Energy and Aerospace at the St. Louis Science Center and a member of the Board of Trustees. And I've spent the last 35 plus years lecturing and teaching around the world about energy and spaceflight topics. And I wanted to add my support as a Wildwood resident and that of my family for reducing the permitting burden on solar for several reasons. We live, in fact, all of you people are seated about 11 miles from one of the largest coal-fired power plants in the United States and the largest one in Missouri, the Labadie plant. It puts out 2.4 gigawatts. It's 2.4 billion watts of power. And it's only got 19 years before retirement, and half of it has 16 years before retirement. We don't have time to waste in imposing any kind of drag on all kinds of ways to provide backfill for that vital energy. We need the energy. We need it so badly that we don't complain about living next to the fourth largest producer of mercury from coal burning. And the various nitpicking about these systems, if you compare it to the existing systems, it strikes me as dangerous and silly. We're all used to seeing utility poles because we grew up with them. They're not pretty. I don't like them, but I appreciate the fact that human beings need energy. And there's a direct correlation between the amount of energy, in fact, specifically the amount of electricity, and human well-being as measured by the UN's Human Development Index. So I implore you to consider these, consider ways to streamline the permitting process, and if necessary, to increase the staffing for handling of permits, because we're going to see many more of these as the next dozen years unfold. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, I see no one else, so we will move to the next item, which is announcements and appointments. We do have some appointments, and they are on the consent agenda. However, I notice in our audience, we have Mr. Segori, Tony, with us, who is being presented for an appointment to the city treasurer position. So if there's no objection in deference to his time this evening, I would recommend that we move that appointment from the consent agenda to this point in the agenda, so that if anyone has any questions, bless you, you can ask those now, and then he would be free to go on with his evening. Is there any objection to rearranging the agenda as indicated? All right, perfect. Okay, so we'll take that up. You have my memo relative to the appointment of Mr. Segori to the position of treasurer for the city. As you know, this has been brought about as a result of former council member McGowan's resignation from that position. And Mr. Segori's background is quite extensive relative to fitting the bill for this spot. So if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them, or I'm sure he is. Otherwise, I would ask for a motion to approve the appointment as presented. Councilmember Bros.
Yeah, I'll make the motion to approve.
Okay, we have a motion to approve, seconded by Councilmember Dodwell. Any discussion on the motion? Right, seeing no discussion, all in favor of the motion to approve the appointment, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Congratulations, Mr. Segori. And if you want to say anything, you're welcome to do that, but you're good to go.
I've been a resident of Wildwood for 9 years. I've always liked the way the city has been run, and being recently retired from Edward Jones after 34 years, 3 years with Mr. Gross at KPMG. Was looking for something to do, and the mayor asked if I would step into the role. I'm honored to step into that role, and I will promise to do the best I can for the residents of Wildwood. Thank you.
Thank you, and welcome to the team. All right, that takes us next to public hearings. The first is PZ 11-22. Ms. Eldridge, do you want to read that?
Yeah. Thomas Downey, 2638 Windcrest Falls Drive, Wildwood, Missouri, 63005, care of Straight Up Solar, 11693, Lilburn Park Road, St. Louis, Missouri, 63146, case number PZ 11-22, property owner Thomas J. Downey Jr., applicant Straight Up Solar, care of Suleiman Kill, hearing date Monday, October 9th, 2023, 6:30 p.m. Hearing location, City Hall Council Chambers, 16860 Main Street, Wildwood, Missouri, 63040. Notice is hereby given that at its meeting on February 13th, 2023, pursuant to section 415.500 I3 of the Code of Ordinances of the City of Wildwood, Missouri, the City Code, the City Council for the City of Wildwood, Missouri, the City Council exercised its power of review of the Planning and Zoning Commission's denial of the request for a conditional use permit, CUP, in the R1A Residence District with a planned residential development overlay district, PRD, for use of certain property generally located on the east side of Windcrest Falls Drive, north of its intersection with Clayton Road, with a street address of 2638 Windcrest Falls Drive in St. Louis County, located number 21U210370, for the installation of roof-mounted solar panels, which are to be so situated on the dwelling as to be visible from the adjoining roadway.
Okay, thank you so much. So just a couple of introductory things I want to mention about this. The reason that we have this on the agenda this evening is this originally came from our Planning and Zoning Commission, and the council with receipt and files, as we had earlier this evening, has the right to pick up that item and take it on its own for an assessment, and that's what has occurred here. That means that this hearing is going to be a little more formal than what we're used to. And so the procedural, in addition to the procedural posture, I just want to mention the flow will be Mr. Downey's representative, or Mr. Downey, or both, will speak first, and then the city will present its evidence. And this is a fact gathering hearing. And so that means I'm just going to ask both of you ahead of time to stick with the facts relative to the 4 items that are at issue in this case. Mr. Downey's representative has asked for additional time beyond the 15 minutes that is typically provided, and we're going to grant 30. And Mr. Vintage, to the extent you need to do that, you can do that as well. With that, Mr. Downey, or your representative, if you want to come forward, please.
Good evening, City Council.
And before you begin, if your client is going to be a witness, you might want to go ahead and have swearing in occur. Okay, go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you. Before we get started, what I'd like to do is confirm the receipt of the council of exhibits 1 through 29, which were forwarded by Tom Applewhite on behalf of Mr. Downey.
Confirm.
Thank you. First, I want to thank everybody here for their time this evening. Then what I would like to do is I'm going to have Mr. Downey say a few words to you. I'll be asking him questions. Following that, I may have testimony from Andrea Burkhart of Straight Up Solar, and conceivably Eric Schneider of Straight Up Solar. So without further ado, Mr. Downey, if you could please introduce yourself for the record.
Sure. My name is Tom Downey. I live at 2638 Windcrest Falls Drive in Wildwood, Missouri, Ward 2.
How long have you lived there?
I moved in 09, so 14 or 15 years.
And you understand that we're here tonight to discuss some a proposed plan that you had for improvement of your home. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And can you tell the council just a little bit about that proposal?
Yeah, I have a proposal to put solar panels on my roof for a solar system that includes the front and back of the house, which face east and west respectively.
And 2638 Windcrest Falls Drive, is that part of a homeowners association?
It is.
And what is the name of that association?
Windcrest.
Okay. Do you have the approval of the Windcrest Homeowners Association for the proposal that's before this council?
I do now.
Okay, when you say you do now, what do you mean by that?
They initially approved only the back of the home. They denied approval of the front of the home. And recently they have given approval for the full system.
I would ask Mr. Newberry if he could please display Exhibit 1. Okay, and do you see Exhibit 1, Mr. Downey?
Yes,
Do you know what that is?
yes.
What is that?
That was a letter delivered to my house about a week ago.
Okay, and what is the substance of that letter?
It says, well, you can read it. I guess I'd have to read it again, but they've approved the system as I've designed it pending final approval by Wildwood, I believe it.
Okay, and do you see any signatures at the bottom of Exhibit 1?
Yes, 3 trustees of our HOA.
Okay, is one of them Craig Source?
Yes,
And one of them Lori Roach?
yes,
One of them is Randy Ross. Is that correct?
correct.
Okay, these are the individuals who have signed off approving your system on behalf of Windcrest. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. And have you contracted with any particular company in order to affect this plan of yours?
Yes, I chose Straight Up Solar.
How did you find that company?
10 years ago, we put solar on the rooftop of our office building in in Chesterfield. And at that time, we shopped around from many different companies and we chose Straight Up Solar. We've had no problem with the system for 10 years. So I also went out for bid to 3 companies and Straight Up Solar came in with the best deal again. So I was comfortable to go with them.
Okay. Has Straight Up Solar produced to you a site plan?
Yes,
Mr. Newberry, I'd ask if you would display exhibit number 2, please. And don't worry, City Council, I don't plan on going through all 29. Do you recognize that?
yes.
Is that the site plan that was provided to you by Straight Up Solar?
I don't see the location of the arrays on it, so I'm not sure what site. There you go. That looks familiar. That's revision. That's a revision of it. That's the final one, yeah.
Okay, so when you say that's a revision of it, what was revised?
The leftmost part of the building is the garage. And you can see down is south, up is north. The side of the garage has a nice south facing location that can fit 4 panels. And they originally put 4 of the panels there because that was the most efficient location on the house.
As we look at this picture, there are not 4 panels there. Is that correct?
Right. I asked them to revise it because as you drive up the street, I've got a picture here. I think this is exhibit 29 and maybe other exhibit, but one of the pictures is right here. When you're driving up the street, you can't see the front of the house that's facing west, but you can see the garage. And I guess, I know much better now how strongly some people feel about solar. I guess then I had an inkling that some people didn't like it, so I didn't want my neighbors to have to see these solar panels every day they drive up the street, knowing that it bothered some of them.
Okay, so you asked Straight Up Solar to remove those 4, is that correct?
Yes, and I believe that reduced my efficiency by like 5%, but I did it anyway to make it as inconspicuous as possible.
Fair enough. Have you pursued approval from Ameren?
Yes, I did.
And how did that go?
I got approval, I guess about 15 months ago. And then because it's been such a long delay, I had to reapply in order to be eligible to get the rebate. So I reapplied about 2 months ago and was approved again. So that in case I get approved here tonight, I might be able to get the rebate bill.
Before we get too much further, I want to kind of circle back. You talked about removing those 4 panels from the south facing roof of the garage as something that you did in order to improve the visual appeal of your plan. Is that correct?
To make it, I think they look fine, but to make it less noticeable by people who think it doesn't look fine.
Okay. What other steps have you taken towards the same goal?
Well, for this and other reasons, I had the roof replaced. The home's 15 years old. And I wanted the roof to be as charcoal black as possible, because I know the new solar panels are also all black. And so I wanted all black solar panels on an all black roof so that they wouldn't be noticeable. And again, that's the first picture here that shows what they will look like. So the name of the color of the shingle is charcoal. I've got 50-year shingles as well to just make sure that for the rest of my time outside of a nursing home, I won't have to mess with that roof.
Okay. Have you investigated what would happen to the efficiency of your system if there were no forward facing panels?
Yes, that was asked last September, October of my account manager at Straight Up Solar, and they've got the ability to just take their computer and pull the panels off and look at the results. And she reported that 47% of the solar energy would come from the front of the house. However, more than 47% of the savings in electricity will come from the front, because that's the afternoon. That's when it's hottest, when your air conditioner is the highest. And now Ameren's got higher electric rates during that time of the day. So I will be generating from the front of the house, west facing. I'll be generating electricity at the peak time, like 4 p.m. to 6 p.m.
Okay. Did you receive a household solar survey from the city of Wildwood at some point this year?
I did not.
Okay. Have you ever become aware of a household solar survey?
Yes.
Okay. And are you aware of the results of that household solar survey?
I am.
Okay. Mr. Newberry, if you could go to Exhibit 10. What I'd like you to do, if you would, sir, is go to page 7 of that. Thank you. Okay, we're now displaying exhibit number 10 for the council. As you see, this is part of a PowerPoint. And what I'd like to do is have you read the 3rd bullet point under experiences with household solar products.
A large majority of respondents with and without plans to install solar support allowing street visible panels.
And again, you did not receive a copy of this survey randomly from the city. Is that correct? Okay. So your opinion would not be a part of that tabulation. Is that correct?
They had 2 surveys. One, anybody could go on and give their opinion. This, it says respondents, so I assume they mean the one that was mailed out. I think I went online and cast my vote, but certainly I didn't do the one that was mailed.
Okay. So
I think that's what we're looking at here.
Okay. So, and I understand that you've been to planning and zoning on this. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Have you attended planning and zoning hearings regarding other plans for solar systems with front-facing panels?
I have attended every planning and zoning meeting since I applied in September of 2022. Often I did it online through Zoom or watching on the YouTube channel.
Okay. And have you observed any of these plans with front-facing panels to be recommended for approval?
Well, before I started attending, I know they were, because I can look through the records and I can drive down the street and see homes with solar on the front, just a mile from my house. So, and then Mine is the first in what I would call this tranche or this batch of people applying. And it seems like once mine got held up, everyone behind me chronologically has been held up. So nobody moved forward in my meaning, understanding of the word move forward during this entire year until 1 week ago. At last Monday's Planning and Zoning Committee, I believe that all of the applications that had been held up were recommended for approval by the city council. Maybe there was discussion about one that wasn't as symmetric as they wanted. It wasn't clear to me what happened to them, but certainly a bunch of them, like a half dozen or more, were recommended unanimously for approval last Monday.
I have nothing further for you. I would like to call my next witness, which is Andrea Burkhart with Straight Up Solar. Ms. Burkhart, if you could please introduce yourself to the council.
Andrea Burkhart, 11696 Lilburn Park Road, St. Louis.
And Ms. Burkhart, what do you do for a living?
The permits coordinator for Straight Up Solar.
And have you been involved with Straight Up Solar's work with Mr. Tom Downey?
Yes.
What has your role been in that project?
To obtain the correct permits for Mr. Downey's solar.
And what permits are those?
Before we submitted for a conditional use permit.
Okay. Ms. Burkhart, is it important which direction solar panels are facing?
Yes, for the maximum production of the system.
Could you elaborate a little bit on that and help the council to understand which directions are better than others and why?
As Mr. Downey mentioned before, south is the most efficient, as the way the sun rises and sets to capture a maximum production. Since Mr. Downey doesn't have a fully south facing roof, he's utilized the east and west roofs.
Are you able to indicate to the council what steps have been taken in the planning of Mr. Downey's project to reduce the visual impact of having front-facing solar panels?
Yes. The REC 410 watt solar modules are in a black frame. They're black cells with a black backsheet. The iron ridge racking that mounts these solar panels are black, and the added critter guard that Mr. Downey has chosen is also black. Matches blue.
Are you able to provide any insight to the council as to the quality of the system that Mr. Downey has opted to install? She's asked for clarification, so I'm going to clarify the question by asking, is this kind of an entry-level, cheapest thing he could possibly have found kind of a situation?
I would say no. Mr. Downey's system is larger than most residential systems that go around 10 kilowatts DC. Mr. Downey's system is proposed at 25.01 kilowatts.
I have nothing further for Ms. Burkhart at this time. Thank you. I would like to call one final witness, which is Mr. Eric Schneider. Yes, I do. Please introduce yourself to the council.
My name is Eric Schneider. I work at Straight Up Solar, 11696 Lilburn Park Road, Maryland Heights, Missouri, 63146. I'm the Director of Business Development and Marketing.
And Mr. Schneider, in connection with your role with Straight Up Solar, have you had occasion to look at the effect that solar paneling has on real estate values?
Yes, there's been a report by Zillow that has shown that solar panels increase the equity value of a home by 4%.
That's all I've got. So before I adjourn or rest, I should say, what I'd like to do is call the council's attention to a few of the exhibits that have been received. Mr. Newberry, if you could pull up exhibit number 22. You could scroll down to the third page of that. And one more. Okay, I just want to submit to the council that upon information and belief, this is from an application for a home on Lance Bark Court, which, as I understand, has been recommended for approval, if not already approved, for a home plan featuring front-facing solar panels. I call this to the attention of the council simply to highlight the visibility of the front of that roof from the road, and to highlight the fact that this has been approved already, and to ask the council to do the same for my client.
Okay.
I'll rest at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Baumstock.
Thank you.
Mr. Venich, on behalf of the city.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor and members of City Council, the Department of Planning is presenting tonight the Planning and Zoning Commission's action relative to this particular request. The request is for a conditional use permit in the R1A resident district that also has a planned residential development overlay district associated with it. As was referenced in the advertisement, this particular item was presented to City Council on February 13th of 2023, approximately 8 months ago. And at that time, the department was asked in regards to this particular request, the rationales associated with the commission's action. As part of that discussion, the matter was referred back to the City Council under the authority of the zoning ordinance relative to power of review. Tonight, the letter of recommendation has not changed from the Planning and Zoning Commission. And in that letter of recommendation, the Planning and Zoning Commission reviewed the 4 criteria that are set forth in the zoning ordinance. And when I conclude tonight, I will introduce into the record a number of items, including the zoning ordinance. In that zoning ordinance, the department would note that there are criteria relate to good planning practice, the impact of a conditional use on the permitted uses by right associated with the zoning district, the visual impact, and then the kind of general speaking, the community benefit derived from the granting of the permit if authorized by the Planning and Zoning Commission. In this particular instance, at that time, when the Planning and Zoning Commission acted, which was in January of 2023, the determination was that of the 4 criteria, only 2 were met, which meant 2 of those criteria were not met. In this instance, it related to the impact of the permit, if granted, would be detrimental to the permitted uses associated with the zoning district. The other being the visual impact. Again, it is important to note that oftentimes during zoning discussions, petitioners, property owners, and others often speak of the highest and best use. Oftentimes, zoning is not intended to reach the highest and best use. It takes into account a number of factors. Those factors can range from topography, available infrastructure, utility networks, and et cetera. In this particular instance, the Planning and Zoning Commission felt that based upon input from impacted neighbors through the public hearing process and information submitted at that time by the homeowners association, that there were concerns regarding the detrimental impact of a portion of the solar energy system and its installation. As is noted tonight, the homeowners association has now provided a favorable recommendation. The other is the visual impact, and that is, again, something the Planning and Zoning Commission has spent a great deal of time discussing as different applications for permits were submitted. It is important to note that at no time has the Planning and Zoning Commission not said that the installation of solar energy systems, particularly the arrays on the side or rear of homes that are not visible from an abutting or adjoining roadway, are problematic. We have issued a number of those permits under the administrative review process. However, the front-facing ones have been problematic, and in many instances, without the benefit of evidence contrary provided by the petitioner. And again, remember, the conditional use permit, the onus is on the petitioner to address the 4 criteria, not necessarily the city. And so from that perspective, the visual aspect was concerning, as it has been concerning in other cases. And for the most part, in this instance, given the location, the front yard setback of 20 feet, the topography and other characteristics, the commission felt the criteria was not met. And not meeting one or more of the criteria, the Planning and Zoning Commission, in this case, felt obliged not to grant the permit, which led to the power of review. In conclusion, the department would just note that, again, based upon the solar study survey, there has been changes that have been accommodated now, and a new set of regulations are on tonight's agenda relative to this matter. As part of the department's presentation, it would like to enter into the record the city's charter, the city's master plan, Chapter 415 of the City of Wildwood Municipal Code, which is the zoning ordinance and all components associated with it, the file that has been developed and maintained by the Department of Planning relating to this particular request, which is inclusive of its information report with recommendation and the letter of recommendation with final action by the Planning and Zoning Commission, the bylaws of the Planning and Zoning Commission, which dictate the number of votes necessary to grant a conditional use permit, and then finally, the minutes associated with those meetings, hearings, et cetera, both at the Planning and Zoning Commission and here at City Council. And with that conclusion, the department will not be calling any witnesses and is available for any comments or questions regarding this particular action of the commission and the presentation provided tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Benich. Mr. Baumstock, any rebuttal?
I would just like to, sorry, Judge, Councilman and Mayor. I would just like to call the council's attention, if I could, to Exhibit 29. Okay, I just wanted to make sure that the council members had a chance to have a look at this house for themselves and to see what it is that is across the street from this house, directly across the street, which is to say there's not another house directly across from it. This also provides a little bit of perspective on the second photo down on the left as I view the exhibit on the wall behind the council. We see the southern facing roof of the garage, which Mr. Downing had indicated that he had requested a change in the plan to eliminate the panels that would have been viewable there. I think we can see from this vantage point that that would be far and away the most visible portion of the roof. And that Mr. Downey is making his best effort to accommodate the city and its concerns regarding visual appeal.
Thank you, Mr. Baumstock.
Thank you.
And I understand we have a couple of speaker cards. Okay, so before we call the first speaker card, I just want to mention that the 5-minute time limit that I spoke of earlier in the meeting will apply to all speakers going forward relative to this matter. And I want to reiterate that all speakers, just as we did with the first two, need to remain relevant with your remarks. And relevancy is that it must pertain factually to one of the 4 criteria involved in this. First one being good planning practice, consistent with good planning practice. The second one is not detrimental to the permitted activities in the zoning district. The third is visually compatible with the area. And the last is desirable to promote or preserve the public health, safety, and welfare of the city. I appreciate in advance you complying with those. First speaker card, please.
The first speaker card is Francis Babb.
She gets 5.
Set a timer this time. Hey, Francis Babb, 2001, Curtisville Court, Clarkson Valley, Missouri. What I want to talk to you tonight about is why people install solar. And this particularly relates to Tom Downey and Glenn Scott. Jim and I install solar because we think that we want to use technology in order to have a super cool house. Other people install solar because they want to save money on their electric bill. But there's a third group of people that install solar for a much more serious reason, and that being climate change and their concerns about it. Those individuals that are really into climate change feel as though that unless they change, unless the world changes the way that they live, that we're in deep, deep doo-doo. And they're concerned not only about, the planet, but their children and their grandchildren. And they want their children and grandchildren to have a bright future. And what's
Ms. Babb, I'm just going to have to ask you I know those are very important issues to you. And we're going to give you a couple more seconds so that you can accommodate what I'm getting ready to say here for the time that I'm using. But it really must, we have no option in this kind of a proceeding for it to stay relevant to the 4 things that I mentioned. And so as you go forward with the remainder of your remarks, I'll just suggest to you that doesn't have with anything really to do with global issues of the goodness or lack thereof of solar. It has to do with the 4 criteria for this particular item. So if you could please remain relevant to that, I would appreciate it. And now we're going to start your time continuing.
okay?
Thanks.
I will try. Okay, Mayor, if you see that I'm off topic, I'll step aside. Okay. I want these 2 applications to move forward as designed. These people have endured terrible hardship. And I think not only do they need to go forward for the benefit of the community as a whole, but they deserve to say, hey, I'm sorry, I made a bad call. And that that some restitution needs to be made for these people. Some of them may lose their rebates. They have been paying their electric bill the entire time. And some of them have, talked to attorneys and spent money, and I believe that they deserve some type of restitution for what all has happened for the past 14 months. So I pray that you approve them, and I pray that you enact a reasonable solar ordinance for applicants going forward in the future. Is that relevant?
It's not, but you're done. And so that's okay. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Next speaker card, please.
The next speaker card is Betsy Vanderhayden.
She says she's passing. Any other speaker cards? Okay. So are there any questions or comments from any member of the council relative to this particular item, or if not, a motion of some type? Councilmember Bartoni.
Thank you. I would like to make a motion that we move forward with legislation, but I know this is a public hearing and that is not the correct
So
wording.
the correct motion would be, I assume what you're wanting to do is to grant approval of the solar panels. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, so the motion would be to grant that approval as part of findings and fact and conclusions of law that will be presented to the council at its next meeting.
That is what I want to make the motion.
Okay, is there a second to the motion? Seconded by Councilmember Edens. Is there any discussion on the motion? Seeing no discussion, all in favor of the motion, please say aye.
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 And Councilmember McCutcheon, I believe, voted yes.
Correct.
She did, yep. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion is approved. And I believe that concludes this hearing. I want to thank everyone who participated. Next public hearing, PZ 15-22. Ms. Eldridge, would you please read it?
Glenn Scott, 16245 Windcrest Ridge Court, Wildwood, Missouri, 63005, care of Helio Solar Power 1017, South Vega Street, Alhambra, California, 91801, case number PZ 15-22. Property owner Glenn Scott, applicant Helio Solar Power, care of Eric Lowe. Hearing date Monday, October 9th, 2023, 6:30 p.m. Location, City Hall, Council Chambers, 16860 Main Street, Wildwood, Missouri, 63040. Notice is hereby given that at its meeting on February 13th, 2023, pursuant to section 415.500 I3 of the Code of Ordinances of the City of Wildwood, Missouri, the City Code, the City Council for the City of Wildwood, Missouri, the City Council exercise its power of review of the Planning and Zoning Commission's denial of the request for a conditional use permit CUP in the R1A 22,000 square foot residence district with a planned residential development overlay district PRD for use of certain property generally located on the north side of the intersection of Windcrest Falls Drive in Windcrest Ridge Court with the street address of 16245 Windcrest Ridge Court in St. Louis County located number 21U 240557 for the installation of roof mounted solar panels, which are to be so situated on the dwelling as to be visible from the adjoining roadway.
Okay, thank you. So the same things that I mentioned relative to the first public hearing will apply here. And I believe the applicant or the petitioner, if you want to come forward or your representative, and the time limit would be up to 15 minutes if you want to use that. And you'll need to be sworn in momentarily. And as you've heard me say at least a couple of times, the remarks need to stay factual and relevant to the 4 criteria. And I'll let you know if it goes off course, and then we'll go from there. Please swear the witness. All right.
Excuse me. Thank you again, City Council, Mayor Brolin, for your time tonight. My name is Glenn Scott. I live at 16245 Windcrest Ridge Court in Wildwood. I wanted to start by going over some of the specifics of my project. My home is on 1.8 acres, making it unusually large for the Windcrest subdivision. I have streets on the front and the back side of my property. I have planted screening vegetation every year that I've lived there for 15 years, including 10 trees that I've planted this year. I will continue to plant screening vegetation in the future. My project involves 30 panels on the east side, 8 panels on the south side, and 8 panels on the west side. I plan to install solid black panels with black skirting and mounting on a solid black roof. There'll be no exposed wire or conduit. There is 75 feet plus between my house and the street. And the solar panels are obviously on the house. They're over 75 feet away from the street. As I've said before the council before, there are 2 to 3 layers of vegetative screening between the street and my home. There's the initial layer of street trees. There's a layer of screening that I have planted. There are large oak trees that have been planted by the previous owner. So it is theoretically possible if you stop and you look in just the right spots, especially in the wintertime, to peer through and see my roof from the street, but there are not many spots. It is difficult to see. And if you're driving by, you're probably can't safely look at my roof and continue to drive. So I would like to go over to the history of the project. I first applied. My company, Helios Solar, first applied in summer of 2022. So it has been over a year that I've been waiting on this process. My first public hearing was in October of 22, just about a year ago. Planning and zoning staff recommended denial of my project. The Planning and Zoning Commission denied approval of my project in the winter of 2023. And the council elected to review the planning and zoning decision also in the winter of 2023. The timeline is significant because during the delay of this over a year, I've missed out on, I've incurred significant financial expense. I've continued to have to pay my Ameren electric bill. The cost of the equipment that I planned installing has gone up in price. So my project now will cost me more money. And I am at serious jeopardy of losing the over $4,000 rebate from Ameren UE. For the history of the process, prior to my application, driving around the city of Wildwood, I could see front-facing solar panels on other homes. I was not overly concerned about the ability to secure a conditional use permit. Looking at the comments of some of the previous approvals, planning and zoning staff has generally supported it and cited the environmental benefits of residential solar. I felt like the CUP review was mainly a formality, looking for extreme outliers of normal and standard practice, and absent of that, that approval would be granted. My project is to a high standard. I went to the extra expense to install critter guarding, make sure everything is all black and visually appealing. With the start of Mr. Downey's application, something changed. At that time, the city became the city, and I say the city, the elected officials, the staff, the appointed officials on the planning and zoning became openly hostile towards residential solar. I don't really understand how that happened. But it felt to me that the city government had kind of lost its way and was not in touch with its residents. There were several concerns brought up, both for environmental, for safety, for property values. And I believe through my comments in the public hearing, both for planning and zoning and for the council, that I have addressed those concerns, except one. And the one that was still open was, are solar panels ugly and a detriment to property values, or are they forward thinking and a sign of good environmental stewardship? I'd like to point out specifically, this is wasn't resolved because it's an opinion. Everyone is entitled to their opinion. Planning and zoning staff is entitled, the city elected officials are entitled to their opinion. I do believe, though, that the majority opinion should be the opinion that carries the most weight. Thankfully, through this process, Mayor Boland and the council agreed to review my application and agreed to conduct the resident survey on solar. And that solar survey, as I think everyone is aware, came in favor 2-1 in favor of residential solar through all parts of the city. So in reviewing the 4 points of fact required for a conditional review, I take issue with those being 4 points of fact I believe those are the opinions of the planning and zoning staff. They need to issue their opinions to act as guidance for the Planning and Zoning Commission and the council, and I appreciate that. But I do believe those are opinions. I believe the resident survey came back and said that the residents have different opinions. So I'm hopeful that the resident survey is got the city back on track, and I appreciate that. My request now is that the city make things right with me and approve my application without delay and without conditions. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other speakers who wish to?
I have one.
Hold on, sorry, Mr. Benich. On behalf of the city, if you be sworn in.
Sorry. Thank you.
I do. Thank you again, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor and members of City Council, the Department of Planning is presenting tonight the letter of recommendation that was acted upon by the Planning and Zoning Commission relative to this particular matter. That letter of recommendation was forwarded to the City Council on February 13th, 2023, and the City Council at that time exercised power of review. During that interim period between February 13th of 2023 and tonight, the solar opinion survey was completed, which has been referenced in testimony by the petitioner and property owner. In the letter of recommendation, the Department of Planning would note that the Planning and Zoning Commission did recommend denial. And in that denial, in this particular instance, 3 of the 4 criteria that has been referenced by the mayor as part of the introductory comments provided as part of this hearing were not met. In the instance of good planning practice, the Planning and Zoning Commission, as had been mentioned, has struggled with the issue of front-facing solar arrays as part of an overall solar energy system. In many instances, those applications with front-facing components were questioned, delayed, and oftentimes denied because of the potential impact relative to the permitted and allowable uses in the same zoning district and the visual components. I would note that oftentimes there are concerns raised about resident opinions, and certainly they are valuable. But as city council members, you know, as you sit at the dais, oftentimes when proposals are submitted that are consistent with our master plan, our town center plan, and the regulations associated with it, residents will show up and basically advise you not to support such. They believe that densities are inappropriate, designs are not agreeable, infrastructure availability is scarce. So for the most part, I will tell you that in the 1970s, when St. Louis County rezoned property by Babbler State Park that the Missouri State Park system was selling, people claimed then that 3-acre lots were too small based upon their 10-acre or greater size lots. And it just has kind of cascaded down. We hear nothing but opposition to new projects, but in these instances, the Planning and Zoning Commission follows the code, and that's the case in this instance. They were concerned about the criteria. The criteria, in the opinion of the Planning and Zoning Commission, based upon its action, was not met, and therefore the recommendation was for denial and not granting the permit. The characteristics of this particular lot are different than the other public hearing that was just held. And in many instances, the department does take into account screening, distance, etc. And in the case of this, the Planning and Zoning Commission heard that a lot of the screening is deciduous type trees. And therefore, we know that they will not provide screening during certain times of the month. We just don't look at one instance, we look at all instances. So tonight, the Planning Department via the Planning and Zoning Commission is presenting its recommendation for denial. And before concluding, again, the department would like to enter into the record the following items: the city's charter, the city's master plan, Chapter 415 of the City of Wildwood Municipal Code, the zoning ordinance and all components associated with it, the file that has been developed and maintained by the Department of Planning regarding this particular request, and all contents contained therein, including the department's information report with recommendation, and the final letter of recommendation of the Planning and Zoning Commission on this request. This bylaws associated with the Planning and Zoning Commission, the minutes from the Planning and Zoning Commission's meetings on this particular matter, as well as those from the City Council. And with that, the department will conclude. And if there are any questions regarding its presentation and the letter of recommendation from the commission, I'd be glad to try to address them at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Benich. Do we have any other speakers who wish to speak? Ms. Eldridge? I'm sorry. Go ahead, sure.
Okay, I have a question and then I would have a motion, but I can wait till it's appropriate to have a motion. But I was just wondering regarding criteria 2B, has the HOA now issued a favorable recommendation?
I have not been provided a favorable recommendation in this particular matter, but as noted with the previous public hearing, the Homeowners Association has recommended a front-facing design for Mr. Downey.
Find it very interesting if they have not. Is it appropriate now to
It is not.
make a recommendation?
No.
Okay.
Sure, Mr. Scott. This will be your rebuttal, just like the other guy.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I just would like to clarify that my home is not a part of Windcrest Homeowners Association. And that is why I did not, it never even occurred to me that I would need to go to the Windcrest Homeowners Association and get their approval for a home that is not in their association.
Thank you.
Thank
you. Next. Anything further, Mr. Benich?
Just if there are any questions.
I don't think so. Thank you. Next witness, please.
I have one speaker card from Betsy Vanderhayden.
She says she's taking a pass. Okay. Are there any questions from the council or comments, or is there a motion? Councilmember Edens.
Yep, I'd like to motion to move forward with favorable approval and the findings of facts and conclusions by law.
Granting the solar panel application as requested.
Yes, sir.
Okay, seconded by Councilmember Bartoni. Is there any discussion on the motion? Seeing no discussion, all in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Right, motion carries. And that will be to be presented with the understanding of the council, just as the earlier one at the next meeting of the council. There's no objection to that. That'll be the motion. Seeing no objection, that's what we'll do. Councilmember Dodwell.
I just have a question. By us delaying, or not delaying, by us voting at our next meeting in November, is that going to cause the petitioners not to be able to maintain or obtain their rebate? Thank you. That was the word I was looking for.
I don't know that we could answer that, but I think that we really have to stay with our process and just do it as the way we did it. So okay. All right. That takes us to our second readings. And the first one is Bill 2815. And as you know, there is a request from the developer to move this by postponement to allow to the November meeting to allow more time to discuss, I believe, the compensation and who's going to pay what for the roadway and so forth. So would someone like to make a motion to postpone this to November meeting? Councilmember Farmer. So moved. Is there a second? Second by Councilmember Hopper. Any discussion on the motion to postpone? See no discussion. All in favor of the motion to postpone, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, the motion to postpone is has carried. Let's jump over Bill 2821 if there's no objection. Relative to Bill 2822, I understand this concerns the Hinkin Hills Estates development in Ward 6. And I understand from Mr. Benich that he would like additional time to address some issues. And so he would also like a postponement of this to the November meeting. Is that correct, Mr. Benich?
That's correct, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for the late notice on this, but I didn't talk to the property owner until this afternoon.
Not a problem. Okay, made by Councilmember Rambo to postpone. Is there a second? Seconded by Councilmember Jaxi. Any discussion on the motion to postpone Bill 2822 to the November meeting of the council? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion to postpone, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Sorry, Councilmember Cutchin. Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, the motion to postpone carries. That takes us to the 5 remaining bills, Bill 2821 relating to revising the budget that affects all wards, Bill 2823 in agreement with Doring Engineering relating to retention basins in Cox Creek that affects wards 7 and 8. Bill 2824 that relates in 2825, both of which relate to agreements for improvements on Highway 100 with the Missouri Department of Transportation, Highways and Transportation. Those affect wards 1 and 6. And finally, Bill 2826 affecting Ward 8 that relates to increasing the amount authorized by Ordinance 2792 for resurfacing that's being conducted by West Contracting to the extent of $39,500. Just as we did at the last meeting, would there be any objection to having these bills read, assuming there was a motion to do so, in unison for final passage? Councilmember Clark.
I do have questions about 2824 and 2825.
Okay, what is that question? We'll see if we can.
2824 were the turn lanes, and unfortunately I wasn't here last month, but the at a meeting in the community room where they came and talked about this, I understood that we were looking at possibly adding Westwood Drive to the list of left turn lanes. And 2825, I didn't see on the newest proposal the addition of the right turn lane at Mueller.
Mr. Brown, would you be able to address both of those questions?
Thank you, Mayor Bowen. Certainly, Councilmember Clark, relative to the requested change to the left turn lane project, that would be a subsequent approval that would have to be made and determined by the city council. So it is not part of this change to the agreement with MoDOT. It would be additional that I would expect to be coming to you. It's at a future date. The Mueller Road issue with the turn lane would be a consideration that we would need to raise with MoDOT, and we will do that relative to their improvements to Route 100 and the resurfacing of the road. That would be an addition to their project, presumably, and we will bring that to their attention.
So, Councilmember Clark, are you okay with having these two presented with all the others to be read a second time in unison, assuming there's a motion to that effect?
I am. I just want to make sure that we pursue this.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you for bringing your questions forward. Is there a motion for the first reading of bills 2821, 2823, 2824, 2825, and 2826? A motion for second reading made by Councilmember Farmer, seconded by Councilmember Galani. All in favor of the motion for second reading of the bills, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Ms. Eldridge, would you please read the bills for a second time?
Bill number 2821, an ordinance of the city of Wildwood, Missouri, revising the budget for the city of Wildwood, Missouri for the fiscal year commencing on January 1, 2023 and ending on December 31, 2023, second reading. Bill number 2823, an ordinance of the city of Wildwood, Missouri, authorizing the mayor to execute an agreement with Doring Engineering Incorporated for professional services relating to survey work for the anticipated retrofits of up to 8 existing detention/retention basins located in the upper reaches of the Cox Creek watershed in order to improve their functions and water storage capabilities, second reading. Bill number 2824, an ordinance of the city of Wildwood, Missouri, authorizing the mayor to negotiate and execute a supplemental agreement with the Missouri Highways and Transportation Commission for state funding for the design and construction of turn lane improvements on State Route 100 at Manchester Road / Bunis Lane, Woodland Meadows Drive, Hinkin Road, and Hawks Rest Road / Windy Hollow Lane in the city, second reading. Bill number 2825, an ordinance of the city of Wildwood, Missouri, authorizing the mayor to negotiate and execute a supplemental agreement with the Missouri Highways and Transportation Commission for state funding for the design and construction of intersection improvements on State Route 100 at Pond Road and at State Route T in the city, second reading. Bill number 2826, an ordinance of the city of Wildwood, Missouri, amending section 2 of ordinance number 2792 of the city of Wildwood, Missouri, increasing the total authorization amount for the city contractor agreement authorized pursuant to said ordinance number 2792 to allow for the resurfacing of Center Avenue by NB West Contracting Company, second reading.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Lee, do you have anything further you want to say on Bill 2821?
Just that, just kind of circling back on the rebate program or where we're going to go with that money. The department will come back with an idea of the reserves and also kind of a rough estimate of those items. With that over $1 million item that we do have from the settlement. In this case, the department is available to answer any questions, but we are going to see a pretty significant increase to the end fund balance based off that settlement fund and also the two missing and not missing, but two positions that laid vacant this year. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Venice, do you have anything that you want to mention relative to Bill 2823? I believe is your only one, Bill 2823.
Mr. Mayor, the bill has not changed since its introduction, but I am available for any comments or questions.
Thank you. Any comments or questions for Joe relative to Bill 2823? All right, seeing none, Mr. Brown, do you have anything further you want to mention relative to Bills 2824, 2825, 2826?
Thank you, Mayor Boland, but I do not, but I'm available for any questions from the city council. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Rick or any comments on the bills? Right, seeing none, Ms. Elbridge, please call the roll for final passage of bills 2821, 2823, 2824, 2825, and 2826.
Councilmember Clark.
Yes.
Councilmember Bartoni.
Yes.
Councilmember Nyan.
Yes.
Councilmember Farmer.
Yes.
Councilmember McCutcheon.
Yes.
Councilmember Rambo.
Yes.
Councilmember Flasher.
Yes.
Councilmember Garitano.
Yes.
Councilmember Bros.
Yes.
Councilmember Edens.
Yes.
Councilmember Ottenberg.
Yes.
Councilmember Dodwell.
Yes.
Councilmember Marshall.
Yes.
Councilmember Jaxi.
Yes.
Councilmember Hopper.
Yes.
Councilmember Galani.
Okay, the bills have passed and upon signing will be in effect. That takes us to first readings, and we have four. First one is Bill 2827, relating to the composition the council approved of the Historic Preservation Commission. That affects obviously all wards. Bill 2828, relating to a boundary adjustment on the Celia tracks in Ward 1. Bill 2829, relating to the new solar energy system regulations affecting all wards, and Bill 2830, that relates to an agreement with MSD for improvements to the village green site in Ward 8. Would there be any objection to handling these in unison for first reading this evening? All right, seeing none, would there be a motion for the first readings of the bills? Made by Councilmember Dodwell, seconded by Councilmember Brost. All in favor of the motion for first reading of the bills, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Very well. Ms. Eldridge, please read bills 2827, 2828, 2829, and 2830 for the first time.
Bill number 2827, an ordinance of the city of Wildwood, Missouri, amending section 440.020 of the Code of Ordinances of the city of Wildwood by deleting it in its entirety, enacting in lieu thereof a new section 440.020 and providing for the composition of the Historic Preservation Commission. First reading. Bill number 2828, an ordinance of the city of Wildwood, Missouri, approving an amended boundary adjustment plat consisting of two legal lots of record identified as lots A and B of Celia Tracts third boundary adjustment plat recorded in plat book 371, page 308 of St. Louis County Records, being in US Survey 909, Township 45 North, Range 3 East, City of Wildwood, St. Louis County, Missouri, located on the south side of Pullman Road at its intersection with East Salia Drive, and to hereafter be known as Salia Tract's fourth boundary adjustment plat, first reading. Bill number 2829, an ordinance of the City of Wildwood, Missouri, amending provisions in chapter 415 of the Code of Ordinances of the City of Wildwood, Missouri, and enacting a new section 415.630, providing for regulations related to the use of solar energy systems within the City of Wildwood, first reading. Bill number 2830, an ordinance of the City of Wildwood, Missouri, authorizing the mayor to execute a maintenance agreement with the Metropolitan St. Louis Sewer District, MSD, for stormwater improvements to be constructed and used for the city's Village Green site, first reading.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Vintage, do you have anything you want to say relative to any of the bills?
Mr. Mayor, thank you. Mr. Mayor and members of City Council, regarding Bill 2828, which is the boundary adjustment involving the Salia tracts. The owner of the property recently was before City Council seeking the third boundary adjustment of the properties. In review after the City Council's action, the trust that established the rights of ownership mandated that no property be less than 4 acres. And so that is the reason it's returned. The owner of the property is respectfully requesting tonight a second reading.
Okay, thank you. Anything on anything else, Mr. Benich?
If there are any questions regarding the matters relating to the composition of the Historic Preservation Commission, the solar energy systems, Mr. Young and I would be glad to do our best to answer those. And certainly the last bill, which relates to the Village Green, is a positive because we're at that stage where we're actually starting to sign agreements and get things rolling so that hopefully we'll have a phase 1 Village Green in the near term.
Good. Councilmember Bartoni.
Thank you. Joe, regarding that second reading, is the department okay with that at this time?
Very much so. As you can see in the diagram that Mr. Newberry kindly has shown, the addition is actually increasing the lot size from a little over 3 acres to a little over 4 acres. And the remaining tract that's associated with it will still be 15 acres in size.
Okay. And then a second question, if I may, on the MSD. I mean, it's great news that we're moving forward and signing things, and fruition will soon be in front of us. But does the department need a second reading on that also? Is there any urgency to that?
The department is not requesting a second reading in that regard. There's still a few steps before we get to where I actually need the agreement in place. But thank you for asking.
Okay, are there any comments or questions from any member of the council relating to any of the bills? Councilor Rambo.
Yeah, real quickly. 2828, the solar thing is a long time coming and a huge step forward. And I definitely don't want to make the perfect the enemy of the good. And so, I'm happy to support it as written. But Mrs. Babb made some good points. I've been making the same ones about ground mount. It might be carports and those kinds of things, or maybe somebody's got a gator with their little shed. They want something.
So that we'll have to handle those at a second reading of that.
Okay, fine. I was just going to ask if there's going to be any, if we can get more information on the symmetry aspect, at least, because symmetry can mean a lot of things to a lot of people. And there are tweaks to be done over time to this, but the symmetry thing is something that I think we should solve upfront.
With the permission of the mayor. The symmetry issue is one that came somewhat late in the discussion relative to the 4 conditional use permits that were just recently approved by the Planning and Zoning Commission and authorized tonight by City Council. The wording has changed as we move forward. Symmetry usually was described in the ordinances as well as this conditional use permit as being a square or rectangle. Now the language basically states generally symmetrical or largely a square or rectangle. In the new regulations, City Council is trusting the Department of Planning to do the interpretation appropriately and forthrightly, so as when applications are submitted, the time delay is limited. And for the most part, we get good installations that are complement to the existing dwelling and surrounding area. The large, generally and largely terms are intended to be just that. If we can get them to look the best we can, certainly we don't need squares or rectangle.
So I saw that change and I was hoping for the answer that you just gave. So I think you're really good there.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments? All right, would anyone like to make a motion for a second reading relative to Bill 2828, which relates to Ward 1? Made by Councilmember Clark, seconded by Councilmember Brost. As you know, this will take a supermajority 2/3 vote to have a second reading in the same meeting. We'll try to do a voice vote and see where that goes and determine from that whether we need to do something more precise. All in favor of the motion for second reading, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, the motion for second reading has reached the supermajority level. So Ms. Eldridge, would you please read the bill a second time?
Bill number 2828, an ordinance of the city of Wildwood, Missouri, approving an amended boundary adjustment plat consisting of 2 legal lots of record identified as lots A and B of Salia Tracts third boundary adjustment plat, recorded in plat book 371, page 308 of St. Louis County Records, being in U.S. Survey 909, Township 45 North, Range 3 East, City of Wildwood, St. Louis County, Missouri, located on the south side of Pullman Road at its intersection with East Salia Drive, and to hereafter be known as Salia Tracts fourth boundary adjustment plat, second reading.
Thank you. Any further comments or questions? All right, seeing none, Ms. Eldridge, please call the roll for final passage of Bill 2828.
Councilmember Bartoni,
Yes.
Councilmember Nian, Councilmember Farmer,
Yes.
Councilmember McCutcheon,
Yes.
Councilmember Rambo.
Yes.
Councilmember Flasher.
Yes.
Councilmember Garitano.
Yeah.
Councilmember Bros.
Yes.
Councilmember Edens.
Yes.
Councilmember Ottenberg.
Yes.
Councilmember Dodwell.
Yes.
Councilmember Marshall. Councilmember Jaxi.
Yes.
Councilmember Hopper.
Yes.
Councilmember Galani. Councilmember Clark.
Okay, the bill has passed. That takes us finally to the consent agenda on which we have the minutes from the September 11, 2023 work session and regular meeting, the approval of expenditures, 2 appointments since we handled the treasurer earlier. The first is, and I took a leap of faith on this to put it on the consent agenda, the appointment of Councilmember Farmer to the SID board. And that was a joke. And Mr. Mary Nayak, who you heard earlier in our meeting, reappointing to our Board of Ethics. We have 2 resolutions, resolution 2023-19 relating to the endorsement and committing $500,000 to represent our match as a project sponsor for the Village Green Project, and 2023-20 that affects Ward 8, and 2023-20 affecting all wards that relates to our policy on using rapid flashing beacons at crosswalks. If everyone is still comfortable with everything being on the consent agenda for approval in mass, I would ask for a motion to do that. Made by Councilmember Farmer, seconded by Councilmember Rambo. Is there any discussion on the motion to approve the consent agenda as presented? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, anything under miscellaneous before we go to adjournment? All right, I'm sorry, Mr. Benich.
Just as a reminder, we have our board appreciation event this Friday evening, starting at 5 o'clock at Community Park. If you have not RSVP'd and plan to attend, we'd appreciate it. And we hope to see you there. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councilmember Dodwell.
Just one real quick thank you to the staff, all the volunteers, all of the council members and their participation, all of the resident volunteers, all of the people who brought music, enjoyment, food, drinks, everything to celebrate Wildwood. I think it was a very, very, very successful event. Luckily, Mother Nature played a good role in it this time around, but I've only heard from many residents that this was the best one they've ever been to. So thank you all very much for your hard work, due diligence, and
Thank you,
it's appreciated.
Thank you, Councilmember Garitano.
Yeah, I just want to make a quick mention. Councilmember Edens and I both attended the Missouri Municipal League Conference, so we'll be happy to share some updates on that. But I think it's also very important to acknowledge that Councilmember Edens has achieved the Certified Municipal Official title as part of the Municipal Governance Institute.
Along with Councilmember Garitano, who got his last year, so clap for him again.
So congratulations.
All right,
Thank
thank you. Anything else? All right, that's awesome. Would someone like to make a motion to adjourn? That would be Councilmember Farmer. They'll appreciate that on the SID board, I'm certain, that they will have no problem adjourning their meetings. Just another reason for your appointment there. Seconded by Councilmember Ottenberg, non-debatable motion. All in favor of the motion to adjourn, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions?